Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to another live broadcast here with caterhamracer.com. And we are here for the next instalment of the caterhamracer.com Caterham Academy Series. This time we are on one of the most beautiful and picturesque circuits in the UK. It might be a bit of a pain to get to for most people. Once you get there, it is certainly worth it. We are on the virtual representation of a very sunny and picturesque Anglesey Circuit in the north of Wales on the Isle of Anglesey. We're using the full international layout tonight, and we've got two epic 15-minute races in store once more. Scott Woodwiss and Chris Hutchinson in the combox once again. Chris also on cameras too. And Chris, it should be quite an interesting spectacle because, as we see, Harry Senior seems to be back on platform again in the Academy car, and all the usual suspects are up towards the front, like David Rowe, Matthew Lewis, James Murphy and Will Rossetti, again from last time. Thing is, this is a very different character of circuit compared to the last time out at Silverstone Grand Prix circuit. That was all about long straights and long fast corners. This one, a little bit more winding, a little bit more twisty, more on handling rather than raw speed down the straights. This should be quite interesting in terms of seeing which driving style this circuit favours over others.
Yeah, this is the first time we've been in a circuit where there's really sort of big stops for these cars. So up into Rocket, you've got a really big stop down to a tight bend. You've got all the undulation, also curbs that really bite you in this track. Most of the tracks we've been to so far, the curbs have been very forgiving. But if you catch a curb at the wrong angle on this one, it really will spear you out.
It is one of those circuits that pretty much it rewards good, consistent driving, but anyone that, as I like to say, takes liberties with it, it will fight back fairly quickly if you play around with it too much. Now, one thing which is a bit of a good problem that we've had is that because there's been so much interest drawn up over the last few races that we've done and the broadcast that we've done, and thanks so much for everyone who has tuned in and got in touch and got involved in watching the broadcast. I'm sure you all are now on YouTube, so hello to all of you that are watching on YouTube. Is that we've got to the stage now, Chris, where we've had to run pre-qualifying, and we're also running a separate concurrent race going on for those who couldn't quite qualify for, if you want to call it, the main race or Group A in many cases. But it shows that it's nice to see more and more Caterham drivers seeing the eSports series that we've got going on here and thinking, quite fancy having a look at that. And I think some people have realised that it's actually much easier to get involved than some people might think.
Yeah, it's absolutely easy to come along, get involved, and like I say, all the drivers eager to get onto the broadcast server, keeping everyone on their toes. So everyone's got to be well on form. They've got to put that effort in and get through this pre-qualifying stage. We're a bit Anglesey is a bit lower on grid numbers, as in the circuit doesn't hold more than 20 cars. So that put a bit of pressure on. We've got bigger grids coming up at the sort of coming up rounds around Zandvoort, etc. So we won't have quite such a problem. But yes, it is nice to see so many people getting involved. And if you do want to get involved, come along to caterhamracer.com. There's a driver's handbook which gives you all the information you need.
Yeah, I think I've seen on the Discord server that quite a few of the drivers, since you put that up, Chris, and rightfully so, have quite praised it for being how insightful, but also how simple it is to kind of read and put together and see exactly how you need to take the steps to get yourself involved in this series. As you say, we've got some circuits coming up after Anglesey. Next week we're going to be heading to a circuit which the Caterham Academy won't ever visit in real life because of the fact that it's differing licence requirements, but it's going to Zandvoort next week, hopefully on the new GP layout, and then we're going to Steston 200. So we've just been to Steston a couple of meetings ago with the 420Rs. This time we're on the shorter 200 circuit, kind of reminiscent of how Steston used to be before the changes in the 2010s. And then we finish off the Academy Series at Alton Park, and that's on June the 1st. So 3 more Monday nights of Academy racing left to go. And also for those who have been tuning in for the 420R Series, we've still got Zandvoort to come on Friday. We've also got Thruxton the week after that. The week after that, on May 29th, is then Brands Hatch Indy. And then we finish off on the 5th of June at the end of the final week where we have the Academy at Alton Park, and that's at Donington National. Oh, someone's performing a bit of a rallycross trick there exiting the bus stop. I couldn't quite catch who that was. It was a white Caterham.
I think it was Mark Ryder.
Yeah, it did look like a white Caterham with an orange roll cage. I think maybe he's testing the limits out of that. Usually the Caterham he normally races is a bit more powerful than that. He's trying to exploit the fact that in the sim there's not that much damage, so he can try and do what he wants with it. And just seeing what he can get away with. And I think bounding up and down isn't quite going to get him a top lap time, even though he is currently at the moment in 14th place.
We're just following along with Ben Buckley at the moment, and he's actually showing off for the first time his 2020 livery that he was hoping to actually show off, obviously, in the real world, but he's had it built into the virtual sim, so he's looking great and resplendent in his new livery, so I thought I'd give him a shout out for that one.
Absolutely. And to remind me, Ben is, I believe, is he 270Rs this year, or is he road sport?
I'm pretty sure he's aiming for the 270s, that's right.
Good stuff. So good to Ben Buckley. That is one of a number of deliveries we've got in the server, because a couple of races ago, we very generously, the mod creator for both the Academy and the 420R, Ben Obro, he's been working very hard. We have to give again a massive thank you to him for all his efforts, because he's been working tirelessly he's been toiling over putting together these different liveries for our drivers who are competing, so that they can race in something that is very close to, if not exactly resembles, the real life livery that they would be competing in this year, if not have been competing in previous years. So that adds a little bit more authenticity to some of the drivers out there, and also means as well that if you're watching this and you do get along to a Caterham meeting for however many we have this year in 2020, fingers crossed, that you'll be able to recognise hopefully some of these drivers straight away. And that's quite a nice bit of transition, I suppose, Chris, in terms of if you are a fan of the series and want to watch these in real life, you might be able to spot one or two drivers that you followed as two cars go, as I like to call, waltzing in perfect harmony at turn one. But yeah, some great looking liveries this year, and it means that there's a nice easy transition for those who want to go and watch Caterham racing this year. They can do, and they can also recognise some of the drivers out there at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely, that's great, and that's exactly what we want to achieve. This is supposed to represent the real stuff, and if it carries over, then that's brilliant.
Excellent. So practice is done. Just a quick reminder to see Harry Senior was quickest with what we determined as a very good time. In fact, there's 3 or 4 drivers actually with very, very good times. Top 6 very evenly matched, less than half a second. So Harry Senior fastest, back on form after he was beaten in both races at Knockhill on Friday in the 420Rs by Matthew Lewis. Will Rossetti, who is a former road sport, he was in the top 3 in road sport last year. David Rowe, who is of course team manager of DPR Motorsport, 3rd fastest. James Wingfield, good to see him back, 4th. But it's Matthew Lewis 5th, James Murphy, a double Caterham champion, 6th, and Steve Arnell, McMaster, Fernerhuff and Elwood. And then quickly before the countdown goes, we've got Lipitsky, Hilton, Buckley, Ryder, Steele, Earlham, McEwing, Curtis and Newman. And then we now quickly transition into the qualifying session. 10 minutes, it's pretty much get out there, set the fastest time you can, and of course whoever has the fastest time will of course start on pole position, and the grid for race 2 is determined by the results from race number 1. So what in terms of, I'm not sure how much experience that you have around here, Chris, in terms of, I think you're sure you've raced at least a couple of times in real life. What for you are the key sort of elements that you need to put in a good lap here at Anglesey, for what any experience that you've got both in the sim and also, if any, from real life? I'm sure you've raced it at least a couple of times in real life.
I have been over to Anglesey once before now, and it is an absolute gem of a track. It's a brilliant track to drive. It's a real driver's track. And yeah, so top tips for this one are you've got to be good on the brakes. So you've really got to be able to manage your braking into these big stops and still get your line. But equally, there's very few references out on track. It's very difficult to pick your braking marker. So that we will see people overshooting corners today because they're effectively having to go on timing. If you go past a spot and you sort of say, well, about now. So that's what we're going to be seeing. So that's going to be tough. The number of laps that some of these guys have put in means that they're probably going to be okay. But nevertheless, I would say that is the tip for me, is can the drivers work out their reference points in this track where there's not too many? We don't have the sort of boards along the side of the track.
A valid point, and a couple of things I did want to mention to the back of that as well is, one, in terms of braking, there are quite one or two sectors here where you are heading uphill, so therefore you can get away in some cases with braking a little bit late, but at the same time, and that ties to the second point to make, is that because there's quite a few blind corners where you're coming up to the point where the apex is almost on a crest, particularly as you go towards Rocket, and in many cases you're coming over the crest, in some cases towards the bus stop at a couple of corners, it's tricky to try and find a braking point, because not only is there a lack of them, but any ones that you can find, you can't really see them too much because you've got blind entrance into corners, so you don't see the braking point or the turning point until in some cases it's too late. So it is almost guesswork and having to, as you say, do it on instinct, because when you do turning, you've got to think, right, have I turned in too early, or is the apex right there? Did I brake at the right point? That's quite a unique challenge for a circuit which has got quite a bit of elevation change, but at the same time has got one or two flat spots as well.
Yeah, and we just see Dave go round Church Point Bend, and that's another key factor in this lap, is that you must not lift off the throttle once you get onto the throttle going around that bend. You've got to carry all the speed out there, otherwise you will be swamped into this top rocket bend.
I think the reason why is including the corner's name. It's called the banking, and of course the momentum that you'll carry from keeping the throttle on through the banking means that you get the best possible chance to carry as much speed as possible on the run towards the very fast corner of Church. It's not quite as fast as Church at Thruxton, which we'll see of course in a couple of weeks' time when the 420Rs head out there next Friday, but in terms of its speed, it's quite quick. And then you've got a very quick approach. I think one of the key braking zones, in fact I think arguably Chris, the key braking zone, I think we can both agree possibly, is up towards Rocket, because yet it's uphill so you can afford to brake later, but again it's a blind apex at the same time, as we've mentioned, so getting that crucial, particularly if we're going to make an overtake, is going to be all important, because if you don't, we've seen it in real life a few times, if you mess up at the braking at Rocket, it can spell disaster not just for you but maybe for the cars around you.
Yeah, we've got actually 3 hairpins, or 4 hairpins really. We've got the imaginatively titled The Banking is the first hairpin, we've got Rocket at the top of the hill, and then we've also got The Hairpin, which is another great name for a corner, and that is a big wide open one, sort of late in the lap, and it's again very difficult to pick your braking point. We're going to see people having all sorts of action into there. It's going to be great.
Can't disagree with that. Anglesey usually is a very good circuit in both its coastal layout and its international layout for cracking racing. I'm sure that the Caterhams, who I know have raced here at least once before, are going to enjoy that as much as well. First few flying laps are coming in already up towards halfway in the session, which is quite extraordinary. So Matthew Lewis is ironically continuing his form from the 420Rs. He is currently fastest, only by the minuscule margin of 57 1,000ths of a second from David Rowe. There's a bit of there's a committee meeting going up here at Rocket, 5 cars altogether, with a bit of track to themselves, so they'll try and sort themselves out hopefully. Steve Arnell, 3rd fastest, but he's almost 4/10 off the pole time, and then Steve McMaster, 4th quickest. Next comes James Murphy in 5th, Paul Fernhoff in 6th. Harry Senior, I suspect, won't stay 7th unless he can't find any clear track time, because he's down in 7th, 1.076 seconds off the fastest time. There's Paul Fernhoff on screen heading through Church. Will Rossetti is 8th fastest at the moment in the first flying laps. Mark Ryder 9th, and also Martin Lipitsky is also in the top 10 from Newman, Elwood, McEwing, Buckley, Curtis and Erlen, with I think at least 3 cars yet to set a lap time just yet, Chris.
You can see that Matthew Lewis is actually stuck in the middle of traffic at the moment. This is not going to be conducive to setting a faster lap time. He's actually being blocked there a bit by Will Rossetti. It's not a good start to the lap, so it's another lap probably wasted for both of them there. But yes, sensibly, I think like Harry is going round ahead of everyone else. He's got himself into a good position now, so he's got a clear track that he can go and actually go and set that time, and you can see that immediately that himself and David Rowe have moved that time on.
So David Rowe onto provisional pole, and as you say, Harry Senior has indeed popped up to 2nd. I thought he wouldn't stay in 7th place, and he hasn't, but that's a very impressive time from David Rowe. The fastest time that we did see in practice was a 44.0 just now, and we were talking just before the broadcast is that if you get a mid to low 144, that's a good lap time. So to get a 44.0, so a low 144 was going to be a very good lap time, so David Rowe is certainly making the most of it. Good to see David Rowe is at DPR basically form a new partnership with FP0 Simulators, so good to see they've got a new partner on board, and that their logo was very proudly displayed on the dashboard, and I believe also on the back of their Caterhams as well going forwards. From I saw the announcement earlier on, so good to see that they've managed to take a dip into the sim world and pick up a partner as a result of that, despite the rather strange times we're in right now. We're on board with James Murphy, or Superman as I like to call him. He hasn't got that Superman logo on his car, so but either way, he's heading down towards Siemens Hairpin. Now, usually if this was the coastal circuit, you turn off about there on the right hand side. That's going down into the Corkscrew. I'm sure it was named after the Laguna Seca Corkscrew. We're now heading down the Tom Price Straight towards the hairpin, and you see he's sort of breaking a straight line, but at the same time moving inwards towards the apex to get the tightest line through, and then quickly back on the power, up through the gears and down the short straight past the alternative pits, or the old pits I think that the circuit used to have, and then into the bus stop corner, the last turn before you head on to the pit straight. Let's see what he can do. James Murphy is 0.873 away from pole position. He comes across the line and is currently 7th, goes up to 3rd with that lap, 144.344, so he's managed to shave about 0.6 of a second off his best lap, and he's still got 2.5 minutes to go, Chris. So good improvement from James so far. But right now, at the moment, David Rowe is provisional pole with a very impressive lap. Even though we've seen in practice, some people can and possibly will go faster if they can find speed, but also, and crucially, find track space.
I saw a lot of cars looking for that track space in that last sort of lap that we were following James. So other people were jigging themselves. So you can see now that the cars have all got a reasonable gap in front of them. The kind of pack racing is now gone. This is where people know they've got to get their lap done.
They're certainly trying to do so. They're using the classic qualifying tactic, as you probably would do in real club racing, which is just back off a little bit. Oops, somebody having a spin in the background on their, I presume was one of their hot laps. We see Steve Arnell here. This looks to me as if it's an out lap because it's a 2:48 lap time, so I wouldn't imagine that a hot lap would be anything near that slow. So I believe he is on an out lap by the looks of things. We've got 1 minute 45 or so left in the session. Harry Senior is currently on a fast lap at the moment. He's got to find just under 1.5 tenths to wrench David Rowe off pole position if he can. I think that's Will Rossetti behind there in the duck egg blue and orange golf coloured Caterham in the background. I think he's currently sat in 10th quickest, just over a second. Top 8 are covered by less than a second. Top 10 covered by 1.062. So all Will Rossetti has to do to get himself in the mix. Well, he's done that now, actually. As I say that, he's gone into 4th quickest, so he had to find a bit more time. He has done. He's found about 3/4 of a second for his best time. So up to 4th goes Will Rossetti, one of the top drivers from the Road Sport Championship last year. He was 3rd in points last year in Road Sport, if I'm correct. On board with Will, up through the gears. Now this is the short little run towards Church. It's not quite as fast as Church at Thruxton, but it's still quite a daunting corner, particularly if you have to steer wide. You can get all over the grass, and as I say that again, all over the curbs.
And that's what cost you the time, Scott. That move there, he drifted a bit wide, had to come off the throttle, went over the curb, and in the race that's going to be quite telling. And
also here you can see up into Rocket, that's the braking, how crucial it is to get the braking right, which is something that Will Rossetti didn't do, as he locked up the rears into Rocket. But that view there is what we were talking about earlier on, Chris, is that, and again here with Matthew Lewis, you go into the apex is blind, and you have to just aim for it and see as best you can, because all you can see as you brake is you're looking at sky rather than a point to turn in. So you've really got to be careful, and also in game as well, you can see in the sim there's quite a lot of glare from the sun, so that might cause a bit of an issue if some people are trying to look for their braking point and turning points at the same time whilst they're also trying to figure out where they are.
Yep, the car is having to do a lot of work up there. It's turning to the right on the approach, so already the tyres it's going as fast as it's going to get. And yeah, you ask it to brake and stop it for what is one of the tighter bends on the track. So yeah, it's having to work very hard, and it tells you about it if you get it wrong.
So the session has gone to 0, as we see. I think that might have been James Murphy that went off the road there, so even he's getting it wrong. We did say in the 420R broadcast on Friday that he's fast, but he's a little bit over-excitable at times. He does make 1 or 2 errors, which we know you can just iron those out. He'd be an incredibly quick driver. He can certainly challenge for victories. Now, Matthew Lewis is on a 144.108. He's currently at the moment, that's the time he's got to aim for. He pops up to 4th fastest with his last efforts. He's gone 4th onto the 2nd row alongside James Murphy. He nudges Rossetti onto row 3. That'll be him alongside James Wingfield. He's decided to jump into pit lane, but it looks as though that unless Martin Lipitsky can do anything to improve, which he looks as though he may not, because he's on an out lap, I think, now that the session is over. But it looks to me then, Chris, we've got a brand new pole sitter. That's actually Lipitsky coming to the end of the lap, and brand new pole sitter by the looks of it then. David Rowe with, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, his first pole in either series, which is fantastic. So that just shows the rate of progression he's made, and certainly hoping to make the most of it. But a familiar face on the front row alongside him once again. Yeah,
absolutely. It's the same crew up front. We spoke to Matthew Lewis after the race last time, and he said he didn't suit this car, but he's up there with a chance, isn't he, on the front 2 rows?
Yeah, I can't deny that. He's certainly put the effort in, and it has shown. So before we get into the first of our 2 races tonight, a rundown of where they are then. So David Rowe takes what I believe is his first pole position in the caterhamracer.com Caterham Academy Series. He will have arguably the fastest man in the championship, or in the series, I should say. Harry Senior alongside him. James Murphy and Matthew Lewis, that's a tasty second row, as is the third row, Will Rossetti and James Wingfield. Then Paul Fernerhuff and Steve McMaster, Steve Arnell and Jamie Elwood with an impressive top 10 qualifying spot to go P10. Then Jeff Newman and Andy Steele from Alan Curtis and Tom McEwing. Mark Lipitsky, who we're on board with briefly just now, will start from 15th. Mike Hilton 16th. Mark Ryder, who's got the Bangladesh flag he's got on his next to his drive. I'm not quite sure why, but anyhow, 17th quickest for him. And then Jim Earlham and Ben Buckley, who will start at the back of the grid in his 2020 livery. So as you said, Chris, usual suspects up at the front, but that doesn't guarantee anything, as we've seen, especially at Knockhill and also at Silverstone, because plenty of things can happen. David Rowe, we saw a similar situation at Knockhill, where we saw the man that was on pole position won both races and had the pace to not only keep Harry Senior at bay, but to pull away from him. I can't see it being that straightforward in these cars this time, but David Rowe, arguably, Chris, with his best chance of possibly getting a win in either of these series that he's had since the start.
Yeah, he's got to get a good start first, take it step by step, and then who knows, the battle is going to be intense. I think we've got about 6 or 7 cars here very, very close on performance, so they are likely to race around in a big clump, and so it is going to depend a little bit on the run of that and see how he comes out, but he's definitely in with a chance, and we saw that there are chinks in Harry's armour. He was beaten, so it shows that it's possible. So yeah, let's see if we can get another fantastic victory for someone else on the series.
Well, we'll have to wait and see if that is possible. Is there anyone, let's say, outside the top 6? I think it's safe to say that at the very least the top 6 are all capable of at least getting themselves onto the podium. Is there anyone outside of that? Maybe someone like Steve McMaster, who maybe could be the proverbial cat amongst the pigeons and mix up amongst the top 6 to being with a shout of a good result, or do you think it's going to be purely between these 6 or 7 drivers at the front, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Steve McMaster is definitely one of the candidates for that. He's proved he could get on the podium, and he's fought with the front lot. He's had not such a good quality. I say that, he's only in 6th, which is not too bad. But yeah, he's definitely got a chance, so watch out for him.
Well, here come the lights then. Our first of 2 races tonight in the caterhamracer.com Caterham Academy Series. David Rowe on pole, Harry Senior alongside. Will it be another win for Senior, or a first win for Rowe, or somebody else taking the spoils? We're racing on the Welsh coast. We head down towards literally turn 1 for the first time, and Harry Senior, with a blinding start from the front row, sweeps across the front of David Rowe. He has the lead, heading down towards the banking for the first time. So Senior leads. Into second place is David Rowe, side by side for third between Matthew Lewis and James Murphy, and the typical caramellage behind at the banking. So several cars have gone around. It looks like Andy Steele's hit trouble, so has Mark Lipitsky, I think. Tom McEwing and Ben Buckley have also hit strife. Jeff Newman's made 1 or 2 spots up, I think, up to 13th place, or lost a couple at least. But now already you can see Matthew Lewis is putting David Rowe under pressure. Get my drivers right, and also in the mix is James Murphy. So up towards Rocket for the first time. This is the crucial breaking point. Lewis has to hold on to second and third place for the time being behind David Rowe. Also in there as well is going to be, by the looks of things, possibly Will Rossetti, who is in 5th position. James Wingfield is in there in 6th. Then we have McMaster, Fernerhuff, Elwood and Hilton. So the usual sort of skirmish towards the rear of the field, Chris, but at the front of the field so far, the front runners do expected to be up there. Nice and clean, nice and tidy, and Harry Senior once again proving he can start a Caterham just as well as he can race one. Yeah,
absolutely. So Harry has got that little gap, you can see it. It's tough to bring it back, and the sort of David Rowe and Matthew Lewis going side by side into Rocket didn't help them keep that close, but at the moment they're looking to get that opportunity, so I don't blame them at this stage. There's still enough time to get him back, as long as they don't do too much more battling. You can see the train in the sort of pack behind as well as nicely starting to form.
I did just spot, whilst you're mentioning there, just keeping one eye on the cars behind, there's a big lock up the inside into the bus stop at the end of lap 1 for Matthew Lewis to try and snatch second place away. He's almost edging David Rowe onto the grass. They're still side by side, but Lewis is there. Rowe has to give him space unless he can turn across and hold on second, which he doesn't. They make contact. Round goes Rowe right in front of Matthew Lewis, off into the tyres. What was that we said? David Rowe's best chance of victory? I'm afraid, unfortunately, because of that at the start of lap 2, I'm afraid, Chris, at the moment, unless something extraordinary happens, all their chances have gone up in smoke.
And he'll have a tough, there's no reverse grid here, so he'll have a tough second race as well to fight way back. But that does, that's an interesting prospect for us to see him fight back through, see how high up the order he can get himself.
He's going to have to get a move on, get it into first gear and get it the right way around. Whilst I was about to mention before that battle happened, that there was a bit of an incident which I think involved both, I think Steve Arnell and at least Will Rossetti. Both those cars dropped down the order and they've slipped to 11th and 13th respectively. So at the end of lap 1, it is Harry Senior who leads the way at the moment, at least midway through lap 2. James Murphy's up to second place, but he's already 2 seconds back on the race leader. Matthew Lewis is into third after surviving that little skirmish with David Rowe. And James Wingfield in the red car with the yellow roll bars into fourth position on the tail of Matthew Lewis. With this Steve McMaster, we said to watch out for him after he started in sixth. Paul Fernerhuff is in P6 at the moment from Jamie Elwood. And then Mark Ryder. What a start from Mark, actually. He was down at about roughly 14th, 15th place on the grid. It's made up about 6 or 7 spots for us up to 8th place. It just shows if you can keep your nose out of the carnage, you can make up several spots in the process.
Yeah, absolutely. All the cars around him losing their heads into the hairpin on the banking on the first lap meant that he could get through that gap. And then again, David Rowe's incident's obviously bunching everything up, so he has made hay while the sun shines. James Wingfield, which we're following here, has actually set some really quick times in practice, so he started a bit further back, but he has again benefited from some of the spins and incidents we've seen early doors, and he's now up to fourth, but he's dropping a little bit away from James Matthew Lewis now.
Yeah, you're not wrong. He certainly has benefited from those who, as you say, have lost their cool whilst he's kept his, so he's going to try and keep Matthew Lewis and co in front as best in his sights as possible. There is Steve McMaster in the white number 52, and we go on board with Steve now through Church Corner. There is James Wingfield. You see the suspension working away at the slightly bumpy part of Church Corner. Now the run up towards Rocket, and you see the climb which they have to run here all the way through towards the apex. And again, you have to hit your braking point as best you can in a straight line, and then just wait and see where the apex. That little tyre stack on the inside is a small little marker that you can use to know exactly where the curve is and where to turn in. I do have to say, watching the cars in front, that Matthew Lewis is closing in a little bit here on James Murphy. The gap between the top two for the record has now gone out only by 0.3 of a second. It's now 2.3. Matthew Lewis is less than a second away from James Murphy in P2. Wingfield 1.2 seconds back. Steve McMaster is right on the tail of the red and yellow Caterham. Fernerhuff still in sixth. As for David Rowe, he's not hanging around, is he, Chris? At one point I saw about at least a lap ago, he was down in 18th place after just passing top of queuing. I'm guessing after some more incidents around him, he's managed to avoid those if that's the case, and already made up another 4 spots up to 14th place. So he's making some progress to try to limit the damage from the turn 2 incident.
Yeah, we'll definitely follow that story and see when he's coming up to the next person. His next person on his list is Jeff Newman, but through that he's got another 4-second gap. So again, there's a lot of work to do still from where he is. Yeah, I think we are seeing Matthew Lewis here catch up with James Murphy. We've seen James Murphy make a couple of mistakes, a bit like James Wingfield is there in the background. He's gone a bit wide, not clipped his apex, obviously making the track longer in these academy cars where you don't have masses of power. It's really important to keep that line nice and neat and consistent to reduce that distance.
Yeah, and that's exactly what Matthew Lewis is trying to do, to keep in the wheel tracks with James Murphy. The gap is now under 0.4, and this is one of the rare points you'll get to get a toe here on the run towards Rocket. As he makes a banzai dive up the inside, he's not going to make a move for second place, but he will try and close up under braking. Now down through the gears, and he'll take a slightly wider entry to try and get the switch back on the exit in case Murphy goes too deep and over the curbs, which he doesn't. He's being a bit more sensible this time, but that glare of the sun must be quite irritating for some drivers. Meanwhile, just behind, these two are pulling away from the scrap for fourth between looks like Wingfield and McMaster. McMaster did make a challenge, as you rightly spotted, Chris, in the background, but hasn't quite got through just yet. And also Paul Fernerhuff is only 1.4 seconds away, so we've got at the moment battles for second and fourth are sort of pairing off into little sort of mini battles here amongst each other. I think that's Wingfield running a little wide on the exit there, but these are the two main battles at the front of the field. Meanwhile, Harry Senior is leading to the tune of almost 3 seconds, so it's almost textbook Harry Senior already at the front. Take the lead, run away, and they'll be challenged for the most part.
Yeah, and so it's unfortunately that means he's not having an action-packed race, so we're not following him right now, but we'll keep an eye on him, check he hasn't had any mistakes. And here's McMaster getting closer again on James Wingfield. Wingfield locks up, but still manages to hook that apex, so I think he'll be alright for the next couple of corners. He is struggling on the exits though. He's constantly pushing out onto the grass, and that's what's costing him time at the moment.
And they do say the old adage of racing, slow in, fast out. That's the way you get quicker on a track, and he comes with Master having a look against the outside line. He knows he can get a good little cut back on the exit, run towards Church, and a good bit of pace, which is crucial. The exit, of course, is, if anything, arguably more important than the entry, because the exit determines how much speed you carry off the corner. So you ride on board again with Steve
Got
McMaster.
a really good line through Church there, and look at him catch up now. He's got that toe. He's tucking to the inside. James is aware that he's there. That does mean he's on the outside into Rocket though, but I think, there's a little bit of contact there. More contact. Oh dear.
Much more contact, and unfortunately straight into the tyres goes Steve McMaster. Looks as though, unfortunately, once he made one bit of contact, the two cars get drawn together like magnets. He has managed to pull himself out of the tyres, and what this has also done is actually it's brought Paul Fernhoff into the mix now. So James Wingfield has lost a bit of time in the process. It's now allowed Paul Fernhoff into the top 5, and with James Wingfield getting a little too oversteery here, so either he just lost a bit of concentration after that, or just still feeling a bit more pressure, because hasn't really been a let up there after all the pressure he was getting from the coach behind Steve McMaster, who's dropped down to 7th place as a result. He's now straight away being assaulted by another coach behind him in the form of Paul Fernhoff. So not that much happening here. As again a lock up from James Wingfield. You just get the sense, Chris, that after that little incident and just before that, James wasn't really handling the pressure all that well, and now he's got Paul Fernhoff on his tail. He's not really being allowed to relax. I think that's possibly affecting him a little bit and causing him to overdrive to try and compensate for the fact that he's lost a bit of time and he's still got a car behind him bearing down on him to try and get the position.
Absolutely, it's never a good thing for adrenaline to be driving the car rather than your brain, so he wants to get that back out of his system pretty soon. Your steering inputs, your throttle inputs, everything goes a little bit awry when you're really got a lot of adrenaline pumping into the system. So yeah, the sooner you can get back and get concentrating again, the better. I'm sure he'll be feeling a little bit upset about that as well. He didn't lose out too much time as it went, but you never want to have contact with another driver when you're on track.
At least not purposefully in many cases, and I think that he'll certainly be looking to try and make the most of the race he's got left over. Now, looking further back down the order, we can see here Steve Barnell's having a good scrap here. This is actually with Mark Ryder, who is trying to hold on to his 9th place, and he's doing a good job diving up the inside to get a nice run exiting Church Corner. But if Barnell can get him back on the run towards Rocket, which he's trying to do here, you may well get the chance ahead of him. There's a good battle here. We've got Rossetti and McMaster going side by side, so where do you look? Two side by side battles. First of all, let's check in on Rossetti and McMaster. Rossetti's in the almost golf-coloured car as we head into the top of the top of the complex at Rocket. Ryder tries to hold on around the outside. That's a brave move if he can hold on. Ryder trying to get the power on the exit, but he puts a couple of wheels onto the curb, loses a little bit of momentum, and through into 9th place at least goes Steve Barnell. And as for the battle for 7th, so far it has been resolved in favour of Rossetti, who's actually been making quite good progress after his little off in the first couple of laps. He's back up to 7th place now, but trying to hold off from a recovering McMaster. And also, we should quickly check in on David Rowe. He's up to 12th place. He's just got past Jim Earlham. His next target, Chris, is going to be Mark Lipitsky. He's now 2 seconds up the road to try and get past. And he's only got 4.5 minutes to see if he can crack the top 10.
Yep, how high can he go? He's certainly making good progress, and he's making sort of short work of the gaps, so he'll be through that to the next car within a short distance. Really good to see these 2x2 action in the sort of just the lower end of the top 10, as well as we saw Will Rossetti have issues, but we saw Arnell early doors getting caught up, and that's why he's still fighting back through the field. So these trio are kind of moving their way back up and sort of will again figure in race 2.
Whereas Rossetti locks up, we need to look at the battle for 2nd place, because Marky Lewis, as we saw, looks like that was McMaster getting a little bit tight, but here's the scrap for 2nd place. I was watching the timing, and he got that 0.3 of a second. That's how close it is on the screen. For the outside line for 2nd place, a big lock up from Matthew Lewis on the outside. Small puff of smoke from Murphy as he does the same. Lewis again tries to dart to the inside, but Murphy throws the block and says, that's not going to work, Sunshine. Try again next time. So he's now going to head out of the complex at Rocket and up towards Peel Corner. There, actually, for the first time we've seen him for a while, is Harry Senior. He does still exist, ladies and gentlemen. He's just 3.6 seconds up the road. There he is, look, going through the shot. Here's the battle for 2nd, which is one of our closer battles in the field. Heading out through Seaman Corner, and now up the Tom Price straight towards the hairpin.
A really classic overtake move by Murphy into Rocket there. He got really good on the brakes, and crucially Matthew actually locked his brake up a little bit sort of too soon, if you like. And so really classic move, but he's not free of the danger. He's protecting his inside. You can see he's stuck to the left hand side. He has left a gap. Is it going to be fatal?
It may well be. Big lock up again from both of them into the right left hander at the bus stop. Murphy might get edged wide and Lewis might force him over the curb if he's not careful. They're side by side again. Now careful, boys, do not hit each other, which they don't, thankfully. And up into 2nd place goes Matthew Lewis. Very classy little move there. He just forced Murphy to capitulate just a little too much. He forced him to leave the gap open on the inside line. Every opportunity up the inside, Matthew Lewis said, well, look, if you're going to give me that space all day long, I'm just going to take it, aren't I? So up into second place he goes. It's a good little battle time-wise beforehand. I can see on the timing screen, I can see one of them looks to be scrapped for fourth still, because Paul Ferneyhough is still a second away from James Wingfield, so that's still going on. Other close battles I can see, David Rowe has got past Mark Lipitsky, so he's up to 11th. His next target is going to be Mark Ryder, so he's already only less than a second behind us. Maybe that's one to focus on there for 10th and 11th place. We've now got 1 minute 55 left to go as we see David Rowe hoping to get himself into the top 10 to give himself a nice mid-pack start, although sometimes mid-pack is one of the worst places you want to be, because if something happens in front, you've got cars around you to try and stop you making progress. Speaking of making progress, it really is Chris standing up onto the back of Mark Ryder, and Mark, I think, looked at his mirrors and thought, oh no, not David coming after me. Locks his tyres into rocket, so he's feeling the pressure too. So I think that it could be a case of all due respect to Mark, when rather than if David gets past, because he's certainly on the prowl and he's pretty fired up after his earlier mistake.
Yeah, Mark Ryder going wide there, and David actually taking the opportunity and zipping on through. The fact that we've got actual real driver liveries now does mean that cars are aware of who's behind them and in front of them, whereas before it was all a little bit random. So yes, you do become aware of who is in your vicinity, and he will know that that's David Rowe making his way back through. But it's still, Mark never makes it easy, and I'm sure he's going to come and fight back.
Certainly trying to, isn't he, through the hairpin and up towards the end of the lap. I believe we have started the last lap of the race, because the lap time is around about 1:44, so heading into the banking for the last time, and James Murphy hasn't let Matthew Lewis get away too far. Matthew a little deep through the first part of the banking, and now on the sprint towards the right-hander at Church, just keeping within 6-7 tenths behind him, but you just get the sense that Lewis has got that little bit more overall pace, even though it does look as though that Murphy carried a little more speed exiting Church Corner, but nothing doing in terms of catching the leader, it seems, at the moment. Other battles that are pretty close. The closest battle apart from this appears to be Rowe versus Ryder, but I think that Rowe has just about enough advantage and pace, I would have thought, to remain in front there, but we'll wait and see. We hold our breath until the checkered flag. Murphy again just a little sideways, just quick but a little over exuberant. He just needs to iron out some of those little slides that are just losing him a couple of tenths here and there per corner, so to speak.
I'll probably be made to eat my words, but given it's the first race and they've got another one, I think they'll all be happy to start in the top 3 positions. Maybe they'll keep it clean, and there is that just gap enough that maybe the mentality of the drivers is, yeah, I'll settle for this right now rather than anything else, which would have to be Banzai. So yeah, I think it looks like Harry's certainly easing off now as he's got enough time to really take it easy in these last few corners.
I think you should know as a racing driver, Chris, that drivers never ease off and take it. So they go for the win of the position no matter what. But in any case, certainly going for the victory. Once again, is there hardly any stopping this man? Once you get him out in front, you give him an inch, he'll take a mile. He will run away with the victory. Yet again, another win for Harry Senior in the caterhamracer.com Caterham Academy. It will be second place for Matthew Lewis. Third goes to James Murphy to round off the podium. Fourth, good defensive drive from James Wingfield. He holds off Paul Ferneyhough to round off the top 4 and 5 respectively. Jamie Elwood will get P6. Good drive from him, quietly getting up to P6. 7th place for Will Rossetti. 8th for Steve McMaster. He should have had a top 5, I'm sure he will feel in that instance. 9th for Steve Arnell. Good recovery for David Rowe. He does get a top 10 finish. He will start 10th for race 2. 11th for Mark Ryder. He's a few places up from where he qualified. 12th for Mark Lipitsky. 13th for Jim Earlham. Across the line he goes. Here comes Jeff Newman for 14th, and rounding off the top 15 will be that's Andy Steele, and then Mike Hilton, Tom McEwing, Alan Curtis and Ben Buckley, who was a bit off the pace, but he will come across the line in 19th. So plenty to talk about in that first race, but once again, just Harry Senior, as I said, you give him the chance to run away with the race and he will run away with it. And once again, he didn't run away with it too far. It was only about 3 seconds or so up the road, but a win's a win for him, and it's the case of people asking the question, apart from Matthew Lewis in 420Rs, obviously, what do we have to do to stop Harry Senior?
Well, I think you have to start working together and don't let him have those free moves at the beginning. You have to just let a few things go just so that the battle can be maintained. Again, as you say, once he gets that little gap, he does not let it go. It's very, very difficult to get it back. So yeah, I think it was also helped by by David Rowe and Matthew having that incident together. But nevertheless, I think towards the end, James Murphy and Matthew Lewis were making progress back. I'm not sure how much of that was just Harry protecting his lead, but never. Yeah, it was. He's done a very good job, very consistent.
Certainly has. It's another race win for Matthew. Just confirmation of the results quickly. So Senior takes the win from Lewis and Murphy on the podium, then Wingfield and Fernerhuff from Elwood, Rossetti, McMaster, Arnell and Rowe, and with the same order for race 2. So we can go through the grid in a second, because as we know, the result of race 1 sets the grid for race 2. So confirmation, David Rowe picked up the top 10, and then 11th will be Mark Ryder, much higher at the grid this time, see what he can do. Starting from the 6th row alongside Mark Lipitsky, then Jim Earlham and Jeff Newman, Andy Steele and Mike Hilton, Tom McEwen and Alan Curtis, and then Ben Buckley rounding out the 19. It was interesting that we were talking about. I did spot in a few corners that Harry Senior was locking up a little bit into turn, so maybe he was backing off, but at the same time realising that the cars weren't too far behind. It's just trying to keep the pace up a little bit more. So it looks to me as if maybe the key of it is also as well. And another point that's popped into my head is the fact that he got such a good start from the front row compared to Poleman Row. He got a really good start to get the whole shot to lead into the first corner. I think it all depends on getting a good start, and then if you can stay with Harry Senior, try and keep pace to him, and then try and find an avenue if you're close enough to try and make a move past at any point. But as you say, getting past is one thing, so catching's one thing, getting past is quite another, and that certainly seems to be the case when trying to take on Harry Senior.
Yeah, you don't want to ease off too much. You don't want to let your tyres cool down. That's going to cause you even more problems. It's sort of an escalating, but if you let your tyres cool down, well, they'll lock up more. So you do have to keep pushing on. And it's very easy to lock a tyre, and it's not too much of a problem in the simulator. You don't get the problem of flat spots like you might do in the real world.
So that's one benefit, I suppose. You won't get any vibration or sort of blurred vision, having to cope with the vibrations through the tyres that look more like 50 pence pieces, I suppose.
Exactly.
But in any sense of the word, we're about 1 minute 15 seconds away from our second race. Let's ask the question. Is it going to be 2 for 2 from Harry Senior, or is somebody like Matthew Lewis, who was able to beat him in 420 hours? That was a slightly different car, mind you, and we've said that Matthew Lewis prefers that car to the Academy ones. Even so, he's managed to find some more speed between Friday and tonight, so I wonder possibly if he can get a good start from the front row, crucially, because it's him on the front row, not David Rowe. Who knows? Could he beat him down to turn 1?
There's every chance he could, yes. I can't. Ultimately, you've got to sort of adapt and learn from the first race, and they've got to take on board that, you just cannot give that gap. You've got to pull into line, even if it means, easing back a little bit. Obviously, the drivers around you might not agree, so if they're not willing to ease back, then you've got no choice. We also saw in the race 1 that these side-by-side battles happen. You don't often get a place just on one corner. It's actually, you'll have to get the sort of run around 3 different corners to get it ready. Here come the lights.
Here they come indeed. So Senior on pole on the left, on the right. Matthew Lewis, who beat him in 420 hours, will start alongside him on the front row on the left. Who can get the run down here to turn 1? Is it going to be 2 for Senior? Will somebody else steal victory in the second race at Anglesey? Let's find out. Pretty equal launch in the first couple of rows. Everyone gets away cleanly down towards turn 1. And as it was in the first race, Harry Senior does get the lead, but Matthew Lewis is right there on him on the run towards the banking for the first time. In third place is James Murphy, fourth is James Wingfield. They all hit the brakes, and round the outside goes Matthew Lewis to Harry Senior. Can he pull this one off if he can get the move done? Goes for it on the outside line. There's more contact in the background. Looks like Newman and Curtis are possibly involved, and head down towards Church Corner. And here comes Matthew Lewis round the outside. If he tries to go through, but Senior's gone too deep, and up the inside on the undercut goes Matthew Lewis. Brilliant bit of driving from Matthew Lewis. He takes the lead. That's crucial to try and hold on if he can try and deny Senior a victory. 4 of them for the lead in the podium places down towards the Rocket Complex. Behind them, everyone's trying to be 5th. That's being headed up by Will Rossetti. They all hit the brakes. Lewis heads for the apex and goes in. James Murphy goes for second place round the outside. When he dives up the inside, he does make a bit of contact, and round he goes up with a half spin. Through goes Wingfield, through goes Rossetti, possibly also goes James Elwood, and down to 6th position goes James Murphy. So lots of action in the first half lap, but crucially, Harry Senior forcing into a mistake and more contact. Almost round goes Steve McMaster. He's now under threat from both Steve Arnell and David Rowe. Down the hill into Siemens for the first time, and Murphy's holding on to the 6th position, being assaulted from all sides. But crucially, Chris, after that all sorts going on in the first half lap, crucially, a bit of a chink in the armour for Harry Senior, and Matthew Lewis, as we said, pouncing on it straight away. Now he's going to see if he can try and take advantage as Steve Arnell locks up. There's so much action I want to throw to you, but things keep happening before I try and throw to you, so I'm going to throw to you now. what an incredible first lap we've had so far, and there's surely more to come.
Yeah, absolutely. And James getting off the pace and dropping back caused him even more of an issue, because he had a chain reaction where other people, and you can still see the chain reaction that's caused from that issue. Arnell having a great little solid inside line there, so he's going to make a great progress there. David Rowe also making progress. He's already up to 7th from 10th on the grid.
Impressive stuff in the first race. One car's gone around the background. I think that might be, who's that? Might be Mark Ryder, I think. He's down to, yes, he is Mark Ryder. He's down to 16th. So Matthew Lewis then leads the way as he did at Knock Hill. He leads by 1.1 seconds. Second for Harry Senior. Third for James Wingfield. Fourth for Will Rossetti. Fifth for James Murphy. He's got back past Steve McMaster. It's sixth for McMaster. Seventh for David Rose, you said. Very good spot to see run up 3 spots where he started as a result of finishing 10th in race 1. It's 8th for Steve Arnell. 9th for Jamie Elwood. And 10th for Mark Lipinski. And then Curtis Fernerhuff and Newman. Mark Ryder's already up back to 14th place. There's Hilton, Buckley, Earlham, McEwing and Steele. So after that very frantic first lap, it seems for the moment, Chris, they've all calmed down ever so slightly, but it only takes one small move to see several cars kicking off again, doesn't it? Particularly in Caterham, you well know.
That was a lot of action for what is only 3 minutes into this race. And they will all be now taking a breather to try and get their adrenaline down. Oh, it's a bit of dust in the background there. David Rowe pushing hard to see if he can move on further up. But crucially, this front battle, although it's spread out a little bit, it's still not the gap that we saw in that first race, as Will Rossetti does drift wide, so he's going to fall all the way down the field. And he has an unsafe release and takes Arnell out. That's very unfortunate for Arnell. He's had some really bad luck in this series, and it looks like that's continuing.
If Pete Stanley was watching, he'd get a penalty for that, wouldn't he, I suppose, after that unsafe rejoin. Anyway, you said that they need a break. I think I need one after 3 minutes after so much going on. James Wingfield sets the fastest lap of the race, 1 minute 44.169, the first proper flying lap, because usually the first lap is not really representative of true pace at racing speeds. So Lewis leads the way, then only a second away. And what's interesting now is, unlike Senior in the first race, Lewis isn't being allowed to get away too much here, as we see David Rowe on the tail of Steve McMaster trying to get himself into a top 5 place, and he was charging did pretty well to get up from what was 17th place after his little spin back up to 10th eventually as they go through Church Corner on the 3rd lap. So it's a second between Lewis and Senior, and a second between Senior and Wingfield, so looks to be between those two at the moment, possibly for the win the podium places, but these 4 cars behind are chugging along quite nicely. Murphy, McMaster and Rowe, particularly Rowe at least, I think he's going to be one to watch with 10.5 minutes to go, making good progress up 4 spots from 10th, and certainly showing he's got good pace in the second race so far. It's
time for them to start making their rhythm and make that count. Like you say, the front 3 are spread to about a second gap, and I think we've mentioned before that in the simulator, a second to half a second is where the tow really kicks in. So given that there is now a second gap, you can rest that you just have to concentrate on your own line. You don't have to worry about the tow that you're giving someone else as Rossetti goes out wide again there. Sorry, not Rossetti, that will be McMaster. Getting into their rhythm and seeing where their actual pace is. David Rowe obviously makes a great progress through the lower field, but he is now in the top end, and they've all got similar pace to him, so it's going to be tough from now on.
Yes, but he seems to be getting to McMaster a little bit if he's making 1 or 2 mistakes, so keep on applying that pressure, David, and maybe he might find himself into the top 5 sooner than he thinks. He head into the bus stop at the end of the lap, and now can we come across the time? Now, crucially, look at the lap times across that time by. Lewis was a 10th quicker than Senior, who in turn was a 10th quicker than Wingfield, so the gap is 1.2 between Lewis and Senior in the top 2, then 0.9 of a second Senior to Wingfield, so that's looking pretty tense. Murphy in 4th position, 2.4 seconds back. 5th is McMaster, still 6th is David Rowe. The rest of the top 10 is Elwood, followed by Lipinski and Fernerhuff and Arnell. We're watching the scrap for 11th, 12th and 13th, but a big dive up the inside with Will Rossetti on Mark Ryder. How he got anchored up, I'm not quite sure. They almost touch wheels a little bit as he elbows Mark Ryder out wide. Rossetti went storming up the inside, and Mark, I think, only just about storming up at the last minute.
Yeah, brave move by Rossetti, and trusting that Mark wouldn't turn in on him there. Mark's obviously back. He hasn't been out of a battle, has he? So he's been on stream a couple of times now, and he's absolutely wheel to wheel. He must be having a whale of time, and he loves it. But he, again, we saw Will win that initial battle, but has he won the war? He hasn't always locked up, and he's actually taken.
Oh, goodness me, that was a bit of a chain reaction, I'm afraid. Looks like Ryder hits the back of Rossetti, and in turn it's also taken Alan Curtis with him at the same time as well, I'm afraid. And Mark's not finished, he's back up with Jeff Newman. Get out of it, Jeff, I want my position back, thanks. as he goes back through. That was a bit messy into the Rocket Complex. I think it all started, and I think Mark's again overdriving a little bit. One person that doesn't seem to be doing that is David Rowe, who dives up the inside into the hairpin, and that's for P5. So up the inside he goes into the top 5 positions. He's still got some left of him, Steve McMaster, who will be on the inside for the next corner, which is a left-hander for the bus stop. So McMaster can get back through if he's able to hold the line, unless Rowe can sweep across and hold on. He tries to hold on around the outside on the wide line, almost gets onto the curve, which he does get a little bit squeezed. McMaster again comes back into the left-hander at turn 1, but Rowe holds his line and maintains 5th position. So nice sequence of corners there, Chris, but ultimately David Rowe knew he had to stay in front of McMaster, and he held fast in those last couple of corners because he knew if he continued to get held up with McMaster and continue battling with him, he'll start losing time to Murphy and Freddie. He needs to start catching up now. He hit half this race already. He
made the classic move into the hairpin, a really good overtake, but he chose not to defend the inside, which was an unusual decision, and actually came back to haunt him as McMaster shoved it back down the inside through the final bend. So yeah, an interesting decision, but that battle lasted longer than it needed to. I think he just needed to protect his inside a little bit, and McMaster probably would have settled down. He was very assertive into turn 1 though. He sort of realised that he'd got to get on with it, and he certainly made it clear that he was coming to the apex, and doesn't matter if Steve was there or not.
Well, he has got clear air now, so he's going to try and close down the gap to teammate Murphy as fast as he can. The gap was a fraction under 2 seconds now, but he's just popped over 2 seconds, so he's got 2 seconds to make up now in how much time he's got left, which is 6 3/4 minutes in this second race of the evening for the caterhamracer.com, the Caterham Academy Series. Do head to caterhamracer.com if you fancy potentially having a look at getting involved yourself if you wish. Here's further back in the order, Steve Arnell watching 2 cars in front lock up there inside front. So that was Lipitsky and Werner Huff battling over 8th and 9th. So Matthew Lewis still leads the way though. Harry Senior in 2nd place, only a second back. Then 1.5 seconds further back is James Wingfield in 3rd, and a further 2.2 is Murphy. That's Andy Steele battling away with Alan Curtis, who seems to be a little bit rattled after I think he got tagged by that was Mark Ryder and Will Rossetti earlier on at Rocket Corner. New fastest lap of the race from Harry Senior. That's qualifying pace almost for Harry Senior, 1:44.152, but he's only still 1 second away. In fact, he's now 8/10 of a second away. So Senior's certainly pushing on this one, Chris, but it looks as though at the moment, for the most part, Matthew seems to have an answer for anything that Harry seems to throw at him in this race at least. Yeah,
it looked like he was putting on a little burst of speed there to see whether he could just nibble back at this lead. The 2 of them are actually, well, the 3 of them really are pulling away in this sort of this train that's spread out. But yeah, it looks like Harry is really pushing out to see whether he can close that gap. Now is the time to do it with just over 5 minutes to go.
And James Wingfield's not too far away there in 3rd position, 1.5 seconds back, and that's been a quite consistent gap between 2nd and 3rd, so just keeping the top 2 in sight, but doesn't have the ultimate pace to close back on him. As for the scrap between the 2 DPR cars in 4th and 5th, David Rowe, he's closed in by a couple of tenths. The gap is now 1 3/4 when it was 2 seconds a lap ago, so he is taking time out of his driver, whereas of course David Rowe, the team boss or team manager of DPR, so James is one of his drivers, and at the moment James has the bragging rights, but David's certainly on the comeback trail after he had that incident in the second lap of race number 1. A little bit of a sideways moment there for Senior as he locked a wheel into the hairpin. We're coming up to under 5 minutes to go here as this little trio having a scrap. This is now Werner Huff, Arnell, Lipitsky, Werner Huff and Arnell. This is over 8th, 9th and 10th at the base of the top 10. Just proves in many cases, both in real and sim, as we see that's Werner Huff diving up the inside to take 8th from Lipitsky, which he has almost done. But it just proves that no matter where you are on the field, both real and in sim, there's always someone to race with in this championship.
Yeah, the performance is so equal. It doesn't really matter what your speed is ultimately, and it's absolutely the same in real life. You will just have your own battles, and that's what's brilliant about it. The front have their battles, but equally it's as fierce, if not more so, further down the order.
These 3 are certainly having a whale of a time exiting turn 1 in this own little private battle. This is to find out who's going to make up the base of the top 10. Up the inside again into the banking goes Paul Werner Huff. It looks like Arnell's trying to go with him, and they're both going to send Lipitsky out wide on the exit. Sprint down towards Church Corner. There's still 3 3/4 minutes to go in this second race tonight here at Anglesey in these Caterham Academy cars. They've only got 125 brake horsepower. They are road legal. As after exiting Church Corner onto the grass goes Paul Werner Huff very sideways. Off he goes, and almost has his blushy spin heading into the ROC, but it's hits the barrier, and unfortunately has dropped down a couple of spots in the process. He's dropped down now to 11th place because he's also lost the position to Will Rossetti, who's catching these two fairly quickly. Gap at the front is now three quarters of a second between Lewis and Senior, so Senior closing a little more here as you ride on board with Harry. He's the most winningest driver in both combined the Academy and the 420R series. He's won I think 5 races he's won now. No, sorry, he's won 7 races, I think. Yes, he's won 3 races, and he's won quite a few races.
Basically, he's being very, very greedy and not letting everyone else have a share of the trophies, which is a job of a racing driver, I have to say. And he has brought this gap down. So when you can bring the gap down like this in a couple of laps, it does mean the driver in front will have to respond to that pressure. And we saw at the early stages of the 420 race at Knock Hill, Matthew Lewis did lock up and make a few mistakes early doors when that pressure was on.
That earlier on, ladies and gentlemen, was me trying to commentate and do live maths, and I failed. So that's the same thing. There's a reason why I only got to GCSE maths, and it's funny because it's true. Anyway, back to the racing action. And Harry Senior still less than a second away from Matthew Lewis. I did notice there extra to the banking. When he put the power down, he just used the curb a little bit to help just rotate the car a bit more, which is quite a smart little technique there from Harry Senior. It hasn't really gained him too much time as a result of that, ironically, but still quite neat to use a little bit of extra direction change in what is a very sort of agile and nippy car. Nonetheless, going wide there, Steve McMaster in the background. He's pushing a bit too hard. And meanwhile, the significance of that picture is that David Rowe is now ahead of James Murphy, so he has caught and passed the former Academy and Road Sport champion. And up into 4th position goes David Rowe. So McMaster got out of the way too, so that's up to 4th goes David. Now, I can't see, arguably, he'll be able to catch 2.5 seconds to Wingfield in front, but good drive nonetheless.
Yeah, absolutely. To get back to 4th, through the top end of the field it shows some really good pace. So it's a shame that accident happened early doors, because otherwise I think we would have seen him moving even further forward. Yep.
Sorry, go on, carry on.
No, that's it. All done.
Good stuff. And I was saying, I can't disagree with that. He certainly has shown some great pace and great potential of what could have been had he not got caught up on lap 2. With the man who currently leads this race and actually was matching lap times with Harry Senior behind him. They both did 1 minute 44.2s. And they head out now down towards the banking now for the last time. And again, you see there, just on that apex of the banking, just as he gets the power down, the rear wheel just helps the car rotate a little bit more on the apex and a little bit round the corner, which is quite a smart technique to do.
Yeah, so rally cars call it hooking the corner, right? You can dip your wheel onto the inside, and it's the same thing for the Academy cars. Again, it just helps that rotation sometimes when you unsettle the car with the curb, turns the car at the point you want it to, and then you can get back on the power earlier and in a more of a straight line.
And especially when these cars don't have a limited slip diff, which comes later in their lifespan when you're upgrading the car, going through the different ranks. I think it's the 270Rs you get correct me if I'm wrong, it's 270Rs you get a diff, I think, when you get stuck in the
it's not until the 310s that you get the limited slip diff.
I should really know that. They haven't come to that in coaches for a while, but anyway, 310Rs. But so that's a good technique to get the car rotated as much as possible. We're on the final lap here for this second race, and still James Murphy is trying to keep with David Rowe, maybe deny him of a 4th place if the opportunity arises. A little wide there on the exit there from Hill when David Rowe, but we're into the final few corners for our race leaders, and Matthew Lewis appears as though he's going to hold on for the time being until the last few corners into the hairpin for the last time. And I think, unless there's a drama, touch wood, into the bus stop for the last time, it is going to be a victory for Matthew Lewis. The Senior once again has thrown everything he can at him. It's just been proven that not only can Senior be beaten in a 420R, now it turns out he can be beaten in an Academy car, because Matthew Lewis has done it again. He's now denied Harry Senior his 3rd win from 4 races. It's going to be 3 from 4 races for Matthew Lewis. It's Harry Senior in 2nd place, less than a second behind. It's 3rd for James Wingfield, a great drive for him to get on the podium. 4th, what a comeback for David Rowe. He will finish inside the top 5 ahead of James Murphy. 6th goes to Steve McMaster. Another impressive drive for Jamie Elwood, who will collect 7th place. Across the line he comes in his bright blue Caterham. There he goes. 8th place for Will Rossetti. Oh, no, Steve Arnell actually, sorry, Steve Arnell. And then Will Rossetti, who is currently 9th and almost lost 9th on the last corner there as he ran wide to Mark Lipitsky, who gets 10th. 11th place for Mark Ryder when he comes into shot in a few seconds' time. Where is Mark? Ah, here he is, with a rather rabid Paul Fernandes Steele. So these three have had quite a lot of battling whilst we looked away at the leaders, and that's 11th for Ryder, 12th for Fernhoff, and 13th for Steele. 14th for Newman, then Curtis and McEwen across the line, and then it will be Buckley, Hilton and Earlham. Here comes Ben Buckley. He will finish in 17th in his new 2020 livery. Here comes Mike Hilton to finish in 18th place. And then one more car will come across the line very shortly. We'll see him in a second. That'll be Jim Earlham. Would have been a very uneventful race, I'm sure. There he is, up to the line, and he picks up the final finishing spot. So all cars across the line. And there's confirmation of the results. So Matthew Lewis can beat Harry Senior in an Academy car, and he did it by 1.1 seconds in the end. Lewis wins, Senior second. A good podium for James Wingfield. He'll be happy with that in third place. David Rowe, again, from 10th to 4th, but what could have been had he not had the incident in race 1. I guess we'll never know until next time. James Murphy picks up 5th. Steve McMaster, Jamie Elwood, Steve Arnell, Will Rossetti and Mark Lipitsky round out the top 10. And then it's Mark Ryder 11th from Paul Fernhoff in 12th, then Andy Steele, Jeff Newman, Alan Curtis, Tom McEwen, Ben Buckley, Mike Hilton and Jim Earlham. So Chris, 2 exhausting but entertaining races at Anglesey. It certainly provides fantastic action from where we were sat, and hopefully you watching at home on YouTube, either watching this back or watching it live, certainly enjoyed that too. But yeah, a win for Harry Senior. But again, Matthew Lewis proving he can measure up to Harry Senior. He can take the fight to him, and crucially, not just in 420Rs, he can beat him on track fair and square.
Yeah, he said he wasn't so keen on the Academy car. It didn't suit him quite as well, but he's proved that he's the only person currently able to string it all together and really make it count. So good job by Matthew there to keep a bit of momentum going into the sort of latter side of the 2 series that we're running.
And a shout out again, I've said it a couple of times already since the finish, but James Wingfield, a very impressive third place. He's come on quite a lot in the Academy car in the last couple of weekends. Just to get a third place in that second race, I'm sure, Chris, he's just rewards. I think you'll agree.
Yeah, should we see if we can get him for an interview?
Yeah, go for it. See who we can get for an interview. Of course, this is the magic of Discord, where we can drag drivers into certain driver rooms to have a chat if we can. Let's see who we can grab
hey,
from
James,
our
have you got us, James?
Yeah, hi guys. How's it going?
Hi James, excellent stuff. First of all, congratulations, great racing tonight, and you must be delighted with your first podium in third place. That was a very hard-fought race for you.
It was, yeah. It was a real pressure race. It was one of those where I never quite got close enough to Harry to challenge, and James and David were both sort of approaching a bit from behind me. So every lap I was right on it, but I was just focusing on consistency really. Yesterday I had good pace, and in fact better than today, unfortunately, but just taking a slight edge off of that, and I managed to stay consistent, and picked up a podium as a result.
It did look like as well it was a kind of a night tonight where you really had to stay out of trouble, particularly amongst the leaders, because you seemed to be one of the drivers that kept your head out there, whilst quite a few lost theirs at several points in both races.
Yeah, there were a few fairly aggressive moves. There was nothing that I saw that was untoward, to be honest. But it's a fairly short lap, and the lap times are so close that no one had a big advantage. So it was really hard to come through the pack. So everyone was trying to make half a tenth turn into an overtake, and it's just hard to do, basically.
So do you reckon it's going to be any trickier, any easier at Zandvoort next time out?
I think it could be quite different, because Zandvoort, it's a bit of a more varied track, possibly. Similar in some ways. We've got some big banked, fast sweeping corners, so that should be good. I don't know. Every track seems to throw up something new, to be honest. And I'm looking forward to as much as I can do.
Well, we're looking forward to it too. So congratulations, good driving tonight. Well done on third place, and we'll hope you see you at Zandvoort.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'll see you at the next one.
Good stuff. Excellent. That's James Wingfield there, third place for him. I'm not sure if we've got anyone else around that we can have a quick word to. Do you think?
Yeah. So we can. Should we drag Harry back in? See how he feels. Whether he's see whether he's licking his wounds after that being beaten again.
Oh God. You're right.
Hi, Harry.
Hi, Harry. First and second, it is a win this time in a second place, but Matthew Lewis, he got you both times at Knock Hill, and he got you again at this one. So, but he said he seems to be pretty worthy opponent for the most part, doesn't he?
Yeah, Knock Hill wasn't great. He was just quicker by like a tenth a lap, and I was in race 2 at Knock Hill, I was trying to sit behind him, and he just got away from me. Today wasn't as bad. Obviously, I won race 1, and then race 2, I got a good start, but then went wide into like the third corner, and he got past me, and then I basically sat behind him, about a second behind him for the rest of the race.
It looked like it looked like halfway through the race you tried to put that little bit of a spurt on, maybe with 5 minutes to go actually, but it just didn't happen, did it?
Yeah, about 5 minutes to go, he started making a few mistakes. So I sort of started rubbing my hands together and going, "Oh, here we go. This is where I can pounce." So I started taking a few more risks. I was looking behind me. I think it was Wingfield. He had fallen off a bit. So I was like, okay, I've got a bit of a gap. Like, if I make a mistake, it's not the end of the world. So I started pushing a bit more. But yeah, it was just couldn't do it in the end.
And in that first race as well, it did seem as though that, again, pace was absolutely superb, but it looked as though that there was a little bit of assistance in the instant that Matthew Lewis and David Rowe had. Do you think that sort of helped you a little bit in terms of building the gap that you did?
Yeah, I wasn't really... I must admit, after turn 2, I was trying not to look what was going on behind me and just look at my delta and trying to put in some fast laps. I mean, I got... Starting from second, you're on the outside for turn 1, but then for turn 2 you're on the inside, so actually I preferred starting in second place in the second race. I'd have rather been on the outside of turn 1 because it's nice to hold it through turn 2 because you have to slow down for that corner.
So Zandvoort next finally, and what do you Zandvoort twice in a row. You've got the 420Rs on Friday, and then you've got Monday of course for the Academy cars as well. How are you looking forward to Zandvoort in both cases?
Yeah, it's the third track in a row that I've never been to in real life before. So, especially because there's 2 rounds there, I'm going to have to put in, learn it basically off by heart with my eyes shut. Yeah, I've heard great things. I hope we get to do the new GP circuit with the banking and everything. That'd be awesome. But yeah, I'm more looking forward to the end of the season, if I'm honest, with back in Snetterton and Brands Hatch, because circuits I know and I've done a lot of laps on previously before this whole pandemic started.
So we're expecting more victories in that case then?
Of course.
Excellent, ever confident, and why not? Because you've taken so many victories, so I think you're more than justified to do so. Harry, great driving tonight again as always. Another win in second place, great stuff, and we'll see you next time for Zandvoort. Well done.
Cheers, guys.
Any more, Chris, or are we good to wrap up?
Let's wrap up at that point.
Okay, excellent stuff. Well, 2 great racing in both. Plenty of incident, plenty of dramatic moments, plenty of exciting parts in each race as well. Lots to talk about in many cases. But ultimately, Chris, it was 2 races that provided the action that it promised. 2 different winners. Of course, Harry Senior, of course, winning again, but a first Academy win for Matthew Lewis. But lots of variety behind, a couple of drivers getting their first podiums and good drives through the field here and there. I think all round, a fairly successful night of racing. I think you'll agree.
Yeah, it's not easy to keep it clean. We did see a few bumps and scrapes, but overall it looked like a good race, and so well done to all the drivers for putting on a good show and making that racing just the star of it. Yeah.
Truthfully, can't disagree with that one moment. Right, so just a reminder then from where we are then in terms of how we go forward. So next racing from caterhamracer.com is our next round, the 4th round, I should say, of the 420R series, and that is the first of 2 visits that we have in as many days to Zandvoort. Now we're hoping it's the Grand Prix layout, the new one. If not, it will be the traditional old school pre-Grand Prix modification there. But either way, Zandvoort's a brilliant circuit on the Dutch coast, nestled amongst the sand dunes. Brilliant circuit, and it'll be on the 15th of May, so this Friday at once again around about 8:30, where the 420Rs will race, and then the Academy cars will be back in action next Monday. Whether we'll be back in action on Zandvoort once more. If you want more information on how the leagues work and how you want to get involved, if possible, you can head to caterhamracer.com. You can also find caterhamracer.com on Facebook. And anything else they need to know, Chris?
No, we would love people to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Subscribe and click the bell. This is where we're going to be broadcasting our races from now on, so it's good for you to get on board.
Yeah, absolutely. Hit the subscribe button. Also, crucially, I think, as Chris has mentioned, hit the bell icon as well, because if you do that, it means that you get notified. If you've got the YouTube app on your phone, or you get an email come through to tell you when the caterhamracer.com YouTube channel goes live, and it means that you can keep track of everything. It means you never miss a broadcast. But if you do miss anything, all the broadcasts uploaded in full for you to watch. Full replays of them are back up live on the YouTube channel to watch literally whenever you want, however you want. So that wraps it up from a virtual Anglesey. We're going to take the not so long virtual drive home. It usually be about 5 or 6 hours for me back to Kent, but this time I just have to turn off and I'm good back home again. Anyway, for myself, Scott Woodwiss, and Chris Hutchinson, and all of us here at caterhamracer.com in the Academy Series, thanks for watching, and join us on Friday. We'll make the first of our 2 bits to Zandvoort for the 420 hours. But until then, have a great rest of the evening, and we'll see you then.
See you then.